Hey folks, Jimmy here, aka Palette of the Dead. Welcome back to the channel and welcome to one of the missing issues of Warhammer 40k Combat Patrol. They are coming through gradually and not in any way, shape or form in an order. So, with this video we're going to go through issue 17 just for continuity purposes. Obviously we've just had issue 22? 21? 21? 22. 22. It was 22. I couldn't remember then. So yeah, issue 17. I already have issue 18, so which came with that sprue, and all the bases for these Tyranids. So finally we have the rest of our good old Termagants and Ripper Swarm minis. Yeah, exactly the same as what we've had before. We've already had these guys before because we get 2 lots of them throughout this magazine's run. They are your fodder units for the Tyranids. They are, yeah, chaff units essentially. They are sent out to kind of bog down, destroy and get killed. So yeah, I will build those up at some point soon and then they'll sit there until they get painted. But yeah, it is what it is. But you know, pretty good. Obviously it gives us a very decent sized Tyranid army, which I must admit with them now having arrived, that actually completes the collection for Tyranids for me finally. And yeah, it's just Space Marines, Terminators that are missing more than anything. So I'm still 3 issues missing, which is quite annoying. Anywho, moving into issue number 17, we were first greeted by the build guide. So if you haven't already built these guys up, very, very straightforward. Obviously, we've already had these guys, so it's exactly the same build guide as what we had previously for the first lot of them. So yeah, you can't go wrong with it. It's so straightforward. Yeah, it is what it is. Very, very straightforward. When you're done, you're going to have 20 Termagants and 2 Ripper Swarms, so it works very, very well. Then we move on. We have a read section. Imperium Part 11, Life in the Imperium. So life in the Imperium is a miserable ordeal. From the lowest dregs worked to death in backbreaking labour, to nobles and lords caught in endless intrigues. No one can escape the Imperium's cruelty. So, the Imperium is built on fear and brutality. Its purpose is to produce soldiers and weapons, and it is so riven with inefficiency and dysfunction that there is no way for its citizens to do anything else. For most Imperial subjects, life is a cycle of endless toil. They are surveilled constantly, with any lapse in faith or reduction in work met with harsh punishment. They are rendered fearful, suspicious and full of hatred by the incentive of priests and blaring propaganda. So, if you're interested in who may be good old watching, the agents of the Imperium are far and wide, and yeah, some of them are very, very cruel. So think of the Inquisitors are the kind of the most feared people. So like in the Age of Sigmar, the Cities of Sigmar, generally everybody fears the Witch Hunters. The same with Warhammer the Old World in the Empire and such like that. In 40k, in the Imperium, the humans fear the Inquisition. So yeah, and quite rightly, because the Inquisitors can be quite brutal and will mete out punishments quite happily for just the slightest blasphemy or transgressions. Anyway, moving on, we have death in the Imperium. Death is not the end in the Imperium. Only when the very last use has been squeezed from a subject's remains does service end. The Imperium has been a morbid and macabre culture. From the Space Marines to the lowliest workers, all are obsessed with death and sacrifice. When a subject of the Imperium dies, their remains are put to use. The bones of soldiers may be cleaned and blessed and placed in shrines deep within the Imperium sanctums, or on the front lines in order to inspire a new generation of troops. Meanwhile, the corpses of exhausted workers are often recycled and processed into corpse starch, a grisly foodstuff used to feed the hungry, teeming masses of the hive worlds. So, yeah, Warhammer 40k is very grim. And yeah, which is where you get the term grimdark. It is the grimdark future of the Warhammer 40k universe, and yeah, it's terrifying, really, isn't it? So genuinely, it's a bit bonkers. So having obviously corpse, kind of essentially everybody eating corpses or processed food made from the stuff of corpses is pretty horrible, and yeah, very reminiscent of good old, say, like your good old what's it called, flesh eater courts from the Age of Sigmar and such like that. And yeah, not very nice. So a bit grim. And yeah, and you will see, obviously this is why you see a lot of skull iconography throughout the Imperium. So things you see like servo skulls and such like that, and you see the skulls on, say, like a lot of the armors, and so on. So like a lot of the kind of the good old Space Marine armor has a skull on the middle of the Aquila and such like, well, the chest pieces, and such like that. So there is an obsession with death throughout the Imperium. And yeah, it's grim. So pretty fun, but pretty interesting, and it's, yeah, just grim. Anyway, moving on, we get a bit more information about the first founding chapters of the good old Space Marines. So there are hundreds of Space Marine chapters, but all of them can trace their lineage back to the original legions. From the Ultramarines to the Dark Angels, these first founding chapters are legendary. So, the first founding chapters, there are a handful of them, and there are obviously a lot of offshoots. Then there are obviously the homebrew ones. So some chapters existed in the first founding and the Horus Heresy and such like. Some of them have gradually arrived and been created and such like that. And you get a bit of information about the actual first founding chapters. So these are the Dark Angels, White Scars, Space Wolves, Imperial Fist, Blood Angels, Iron Hands, Ultramarine, Salamanders, and Raven Guard are your core first founding chapters, which is pretty cool. And you get a little tiny bit of guff about each one of them. In all honesty, some of my favourites are the Dark Angels. I do really like the Dark Angels. I do like the Blood Angels. I do like the Salamanders. They're pretty cool. And I, yeah, have a love-hate relationship with Ultramarines. They're the poster boys. They look alright, but meh. I like to book for trend and go for something slightly different, which is why the last time I was painting Space Marines, I went for an offshoot of the Salamanders, and yeah, went along them lines. So, anyway, we've had enough about little Ultramarines and the Imperium, so let's have a look at the Hive Fleet adaptations. So, there are many different Hive Fleets within the kind of Tyranid system. There are few of them that are big, few of them that are small. And you get different colour schemes depending on the actual Hive Fleet, a lot of times anyway. So, Hive Fleet Leviathan is the generic colouring. That kind of purple carapace with the kind of bone white kind of main kind of unit and such like that, and that little bit of fleshy tone to certain areas is a pretty good colour scheme. It's very generic though. Then you got Behemoth though, which is red and kind of that kind of dark blue, ink by darkness kind of colouring, which I must admit I do really like. I think it looks really good and stands out a little bit better, and I think it's a bit more unique. And obviously they are very deadly as well. Then we get some of the other offshoots. So Hydra, also pretty cool, a lighter blue and a slightly brighter red. Then we've got Kronos with a red carapace and kind of darker, kind of browny kind of colouring to them. Kraken being a kind of burgundy-ish kind of colour. And Bone again, because we're like going with that colour scheme. And then you got Jormungandr. Yeah, I'm not going to even try and pronounce that again. Yellow and black, which actually I must admit I do really like. I think it looks very good, having that black and kind of greyish kind of colour scheme. Personally, I've still not decided on mine. I want my Tyranids to look a little bit more blended in with the jungle, so I might go more greens, but I may go with that colour scheme. They do look really good. So, pretty cool stuff. And it's very, very useful to have more information about the different hive fleets that the Tyranids have arrived on, which is pretty cool stuff. Then we get more reading section, the tools of war, so munitions, manufactorium, going through all this and this fiction, going through all of it. Pretty cool, pretty interesting, pretty different. I'm not going to try and read any of it, in all honesty. Anywho, moving on, giving us more rules and breakdown of how to utilise and play the games and the basics and such like that, we get command points and stratagems. So, your command points obviously help you kind of utilise stratagems that you can then pay for them with. So kind of like using mana. In Magic the Gathering, you use your land, pay for your kind of your spells and such like that. So if you need a stratagem that you may want to use, so like command reroll for instance, it is going to cost you a command point. So you build these up over time and you can spend them, and certain things can get you more command points. So it works pretty well, and obviously in the bottom here you can cut these out if you want to. If you do not want to, I do not blame you, because obviously it's quite now part of the magazine. Obviously you could just create these yourself, print them off, get some card, make them yourself. You can buy tokens online, so yeah, it's up to you. Moving on, we had scenario 13, bring it down. This pits Captain in Terminator armour, 5 Infernus Marines, 5 Terminators, and Librarian against the Psychophage Tyranid Prime, 10 Termagants, 3 Von Ryan's Leapers, and 5 Barbhorns. So near enough the entirety of our combat patrols going head to head and yeah, just smashing into each other, which works very well in my opinion. I think it does exactly what you need it to do. So obviously the Tyranids do get a little boost, obviously with this magazine, with having the extra 10 Termagants, which is pretty nifty and pretty cool. So happy days. Obviously if you're playing along with the magazine, you're going to want to keep an eye on all these phases and such like, and you are going to be using it on the battle mat and using them cards that we've had earlier on, which give us kind of an indication of where terrain will be, so you can put your Librarian head to head with the Psychophage, which is pretty cool, pretty nifty, and very, very different. So it works very, very well, and obviously play through it a few times to give yourself a real good understanding of how to play the game, and away we go. So happy days. Then obviously issue 18, we've already had it. Issue 19, we've already had it. I'm not going to talk about them. So thank you very, very much for joining us on this back issue. Eventually the others will turn up, I hope. Maybe one day. They're trickling in, one a week. But yeah, we'll see. Anyway, if you haven't checked it out already, issue 22 is already up. So why not? Thank you very much for watching though. And I'll see you sometime soon. Bye-bye now.